Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm just letting people in now. Hang on a few more seconds. I know we have more coming.
Oh, I see familiar student faces. Yay! Morgan, Nathina.
Awesome.
I had to call you out, but I know you.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep an eye on the waiting room because, like I said, we are expecting a nice size group today, which is just terrific. But I also know we have a nice full program, so I don't want to wait much longer. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amanda Latreille. I'm the WWoCS Program Support Coordinator. I do coordinate the WWoCS Women of Color in STEM program. So welcome, and welcome if this is your first program with us, and welcome back if you've been with us before. This is our first program of 2021, so Happy New Year. I do have a few announcements before I pass it along and we get started on our content today. You'll note I am recording the session. We plan to share this with our WWoCS Women of Color in STEM community. I've already had a couple of requests from people who could not attend that really are looking forward to the recording. So just to note, we are recording. At the end of all of our programs, some of you know, certainly if you've been with us before, we do an evaluation. We try and keep those short and sweet, but your feedback is very important to us. We do use it to inform future programming. We also use it to obtain support for future programming. So super important that you complete that evaluation, and I'll pop that link in at the end of the session today. So a couple of other announcements I definitely wanted to make sure that I brought up. If you're on our listserv, you probably already saw the email about our February 9th networking event. We're really excited about that. That's going to be an informal, fun, relaxed event just to get to know one another a little better. So please check that out. I'm going to pop that link in the chat in just a second if you want to sign up. Some of you I know specifically asked for a networking event, so I hope we get a good turnout. It should be fun. The other thing I want to mention, the Slepecki Undergraduate Research Prize is an annual prize that WWoCS gives out in memory of Norma Slepecki. She was a professor here at SU. It's a $750 prize for undergraduate research. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to pop that link in the chat as well, and please consider applying. That's due March 12th, and we have a lovely ceremony and lecture in April to celebrate that. So please check that out as well. So yes, on to our topic of the day, personal statements and application tips if you're considering RU. It is my pleasure to introduce Melissa Welshans. She is the Assistant Director at the Center for Fellowship and Scholarship Advising. So I want to pass it along to Melissa. I thank you so much. It sounds like it's been a busy week and a busy time. They're doing so much in terms of getting people ready for their applications and awarding several awards, it sounds like, this week. So lots going on at CFCA, and we really appreciate your time joining us today. So with that, I'm going to pass it along to you, Melissa.
Well, thank you very much. And as a former teacher, I received my PhD in the English department here at SU. And while I was in my program, I taught many, many English classes, and I miss student interaction. So it's always a pleasure for me to be in front of a classroom, so to speak, in these virtual times. And I also want to note that we're joined today also by Alyssa Quintero, who is, I have a slide for, but she'll be kind of talking about her experience applying for fellowships and scholarships throughout her undergraduate career. So without further ado, I am going to share screen for my PowerPoint. All right, can everybody see that? Looks good?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I guess I will click on it. Is that how it's gonna work? Okay, so today I'm gonna cover, so what is a personal statement and what is its purpose? How do you begin drafting a personal statement? How do you approach the opening paragraph of a personal statement? Very important. What resources on campus can help you write a personal statement? And then specifically just a little bit of discussion of the National Science Foundation's Research Experience for Undergraduates program, or REUs, and how to prepare an app based on the application. And that will be the focus of a breakout room activity that we have for y'all later on. And then advice from a fellow WWoCS Women of Color in STEM member, Alyssa Quintero, who is a major in chemistry and environmental science and policy. and then some final key takeaways. All right. And throughout, Amanda, if you wouldn't mind, if there's questions in the chat, feel free to interrupt me and then we can deal with them as we go.
Absolutely.
Students
Sounds
also
good.
feel free to chat. So what is a personal statement? And specifically here, as this description notes, we're talking today about personal statements for things like fellowships, scholarships, internships, grad school, etc. So a personal statement is a narrative essay that charts your personal and academic trajectory as it relates to a specific opportunity. And so I really want to instill early on that this is what makes a personal statement for these types of things typically different from maybe the essays that you wrote to get into SU, for example. That while they do want to get to know who you are, these awards are often funding you as a human being, but they also are funding you insofar as you demonstrate how your career goals and your academic interests are related to the mission of the foundation and the particular award. And so it's really tailoring, the presentation of who you are to fit their interests and mission. And so how do you begin brainstorming a personal statement? And so this is something you can do generally even before you find an opportunity, although obviously it's helpful once you do identify one. So make sure you're familiar with, so identify the opportunity, the application and its application questions. If there is a specific prompt for the personal statement, read it carefully. The institution, foundation, or organization's mission and goals. And then this is the part you can do, your own future goals. One of the main points that I also want to convey through this presentation is that for any of these opportunities, regardless whether or not you're a first-year student or whether or not you're a senior, you have to have a sense of what you want to do after you graduate. And not just like, oh, I want to go to graduate school, because you can't stay in graduate school forever, or ideally you should not. You eventually will be going to graduate school to prepare you for something else. And so, early on, it's okay to have one or two kind of ideas, but especially as you advance in your undergraduate career, you should be reasonably specific about the kind of work you want to do and what are the realistic steps necessary to get there. And so you want to really spend time reflecting on that. And then once you pick out some opportunities that you want to apply for, thinking about how those opportunities are going to help prepare you for that future goal. And then, so finally, the academic and personal experiences that have shaped your interest and preparedness for these goals. And so some general personal statement do's and don'ts. So tell a story by showing what you've done. So demonstrate your qualifications through concrete examples as opposed to presenting a resume list. And this again is really important. And I have on the next slide a couple of examples of what that looks like really to show versus tell. Do make sure you're using words that mimic or mirror the language of the application itself. If the application is really clear that it's looking for somebody with a specific academic focus or specific passion for social justice or, polymer research, or if they're looking for someone with a particular background personally, you really want to kind of pick up on those keywords and use that in your own application to help connect your experiences with what they're looking for. And then again, as I said, I would be reiterating, be clear and specific about your professional goals. And if you do think you're somebody who still is really working that out, just remember, these aren't usually contracts. They're not going to track you down in 5 years to make sure that you actually did what you said in your application, but you just need to present yourself as somebody who has, reasonable ideas for what a future career could look like for you. Things to not do. So don't discuss experiences from your early childhood. That's a general rule that can change depending on, again, what that foundation is looking for, especially awards that are really interested in diversifying the STEM field, for example. You might end up discussing your early childhood experiences if it really highlights your relationship to diversity. But generally, especially when highlighting your academic interest, you want to start with experiences that are probably no later than late high school or your freshman or sophomore years of college. So really underscoring some more recent substantive sort of academic experiences that have helped shape your interests. Don't include cliches or overly general language. Phrases that often get repeated become just sort of buzzwords without meaning. And most application readers are reading many, many applications, and it's just easy to sort of tune out when you're seeing a lot of unspecific sort of words. So things like comfort zone or gain a unique perspective. The word unique is probably a word that if you can at all costs, try to avoid. And so just kind of when you go through when you're editing, kind of looking for those things. So to the point of show versus tell. So here's an example. So if you were writing in an essay and you wanted to say something about the fact that you have experience working in a lab, on the left-hand side, the first one I have here is an example of telling. So if you wrote something like, I have a lot of experience running experiments in previous lab settings and am passionate about designing new scientific methods. Okay, like fine. But the reader is sort of left with like, well, that's great. I could say I'm passionate and interested about being a concert pianist, but like, what have you done to actually demonstrate that you're capable of doing that? So instead, you rewrite the sentence, and maybe you could have something that's a little bit of a tell as like an intro, but you need to follow it up with showing what you've done. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a much longer sentence that describes an experience. So as a researcher in Dr. Zhang's lab, I assisted a graduate student in running sediment analysis of the water runoff from the green roof of an event venue in the city of Syracuse. I reviewed, sorted, and manipulated the data to observe different seasonal trends. Then I designed and implemented methods to research the porosity and field capacity of the artificial soil on the green roof, period. And so, I'm sure it's pretty evident how the two are different. You know, one of them sort of gives a general overview of interest and capacity, and the other is a very specific description of an actual event that implicitly does the same thing. And so for the next one, a lot of applications ask for diversity statements, or again, might have you know, an interest in recruiting a diverse student body into their STEM program. So saying something like, I am sensitive to diversity, again, doesn't really matter that much without any sort of backing up or support. However, telling a story about a time that you had to work with a diverse group of people and promote different values and ideas is much more valuable. And so a showing example would be, you know, serving as an RA in a dorm that included students from all over the US, China, and other parts of the world. I collaborated with my residents to develop movie nights with films from different students' home cultures and invited the whole floor to attend. Such events allowed the residents to share their information about their home country with others and develop new friendships over common interests they wouldn't have discovered otherwise. So again, you know, it doesn't have the phrase, I am sensitive to diversity, but it clearly demonstrates one's ability to think creatively about bringing people together across an array of difference through specific means, and that they have a passion for doing so. And so that's what we mean when we say show versus tell. So how do you get started? So again, kind of thinking about brainstorming, begin brainstorming by free writing answers to the following questions. And so for the first one is more general background, and then the second step is specific to the program. So where did I come from? Where am I now? And where am I going? I want you to think of that in terms of, you know, where did you grow up? You know, what is your background? Again, it might not feature a whole lot in your actual writing, but oftentimes it's useful, at least for yourself, you know. And like I said, a lot of programs are interested in lots of kinds of diversity, you know, not only things like race, ethnicity, gender, but also regional. You know, there's less students applying to programs who come from like the rural South necessarily than there are from Connecticut. And so, you know, think about how that background might have impacted the resources you had available to you and the paths that you've chosen. Where are you now? So student at SU, what are you studying? And then where am I going? What are those future goals? And what drives you to take on the academic and personal challenges that you're involved in right now? How do you stand out from your peers? So think about skills and background. You know, are there opportunities you've had that others likely haven't had at this stage? Say you're a sophomore and you've had a chance to take an upper division, you know, science course, or you've been asked to participate in a lab, or you've had a source grant, or things like that that make you stand out. You know, kind of think about what you really bring to the table. So the last time you were completely engrossed in a project or research activity, what were you doing? What does this say about your interest, passion, and abilities? And this again is a bit more of a general question and might be one that's really helpful for you if, again, you are someone still kind of struggling with like, what do you want to do with the degree you're earning or the skills you're developing in the future? Just kind of think like what gets you intellectually excited and why. I know early on, I was really engrossed with an really old poem written in the 1600s called Paradise Lost by a guy named John Milton. And I remember sitting in the library just reading this book about Adam and Eve, who tells the story of Eden from the Christian tradition. And, I was fascinated because I was somebody who got engaged young and was grew up in this rural conservative community where marriage was really promoted as the ideal role for women. And, and I can imagine, given your own intellectual interests, you having a similar moment, like, whoa, like what really captured your attention and why? What drove you to want to, spend extra hours in the lab doing that experiment, or to take on an additional research project because you were so inspired by this question? And I think this is the next one is especially important for scientists and individuals who want to do grad work. So what mistakes have I made as they relate specifically to my research, academic, or professional growth? And how have I learned and grown from these? And you can think in terms of mistakes, or you can also think in terms of times you've had to like rework and adapt. And I think adaptability is really a quality that almost every fellowship, scholarship, grad app is really looking for. And again, especially in a scientist, when was a moment that you had to, revise a hypothesis, or when you, maybe, tried a method, it didn't work, did something else, and then it did, and how have you really been able to overcome challenges and move forward? For those of you applying to opportunities this year and probably next, I think this is also a good way to kind of think about the lessons that you've learned from challenges presented by COVID and having to switch to virtual scenarios as opposed to in-person experience, if so, or having to rework research questions to accommodate for the working world that we live in. And then finally, what are some key moments in your academic, professional, or personal life? What are some of the most formative experiences of your life, and why did they have a significant impact on you? And so again, you can think about, your childhood, you can think about earlier on, but again, always filtering it through what's relevant to knowing why I'm pursuing the interest at hand. And as you'll see, there's probably some overlap in some of these questions. And so just do with them what you can, but hopefully this will give you it'll help you take stock of everything you bring to the table. We often in SIFSA find that we'll have meetings with students or read their first drafts, but then after conversations, we're like, wait, you had this like prestigious internship and you never mentioned it, and it's really relevant to the thing you're applying for. Why is that? And they're like, oh, I just forgot that this might be relevant. Most of you have so many experiences that it's easy to kind of forget what happened, in the many years that you've had on this earth. And so sitting down and trying to remember is really important for starting this process. And so then you move on to information about the program itself. So what is the mission of the institution, organization, or foundation to which you're applying? So for the NSF, the National Science Foundation, they're really passionate about promoting scientific knowledge and solving social problems through scientific inquiry. And then you have the specific research experience for undergraduates' own mission. If it's a different organization like the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, they have some awards that we work with. They're really interested in oceans and science and climate change as they pertain to them. So it's really important to know what is the mission or focus of that program, and how might it align with what you've been working on. And what are some keywords in the application on their website? What are the things that you're seeing repeated over and over again, the themes that seem to be important to them? And then last but definitely not least, how do your academic or professional goals align with the mission of the institution, organization, or foundation? And so the opening paragraph, this is definitely something that might come to you later in the writing experience. But again, kind of keeping in mind that most application readers are reading through quite a bit. You want to get the application reader's attention as soon as you can. And so it's really helpful if you can think of a hook or a sort of narrative you can tell or experience you can describe that underscores some of the broader themes you will present in your statement. So maybe you had like a really neat experience in a lab and you want to start right out with kind of, describing like this, weird phosphorescent jelly you and your lab partner found under a microscope. Like that might be super interesting and you kind of tell it narratively. Depending on the award, it might be more useful to start right out. Like I am a, major in biology and a minor in this, and I'm really passionate about solving issues related to, neural engineering or something. So you really do kind of want to take the lead of the opportunity or of the program to which you're applying, but making sure that you don't waste that space. Don't start out with things like, I've always been interested in butterflies. Because first of all, you haven't always technically, you probably didn't come out of the womb excited about butterflies. And then you also okay, like, what does that mean though? I'm interested in butterflies, but again, that might not say anything about, maybe this specific program that really wants you to have a particular skill set. So really be thinking strategically about how you start your applications. And again, this sometimes can be a little intimidating as a practice. So you might want to write other pieces first and then continue to go back and think about what you want your hook to be once everything else is in place. But it's something that you should definitely spend a little time thinking strategically about. And this comes to my next point about revision. So these documents are not easy to write, and therefore you should start early and seek help. I mentioned my own academic background. I have a PhD in English. I wrote a lot of stuff. I learned a lot since taking on this role in SIFSA about the specific genre of applications. They are a genre unto themselves with their own hallmarks and requirements, and no one is an expert unless you've done quite a lot of them. And so it will just take time to, and like I have also said, you all have so much varied experience and skills and pieces of yourself that need to come to bear in these, but you also will have a word limit. You might only have 300 words or 500 words. I see Alyssa like, yes, it's so hard to squeeze all of that in. And so you really need to do a lot of wordsmithing to figure out how to say what you want to say, how to get all the important parts about yourself into a very truncated space. So that it just takes time. So give yourself time. So read to make sure you are showing versus telling. Are you including enough examples? Look for sentences where you just say things that you like to do or interested in, and think about how you can replace those with examples or specific instances where you have done the thing. Read for grandiose or vague language and just cut it. Again, you'll have a word limit or a page limit, and just cut the fluff. Just get rid of it. Yeah, this is really an exercise where, again, it's not creative writing in the sense that you really need to practice not being precious with your words. You will cut a lot of things that you write, and you just need to learn to be okay with that as a natural part of the revision process. Read your statement out loud to avoid awkward phrasing. I've always found this to be the most useful. Sometimes it is a challenge to do this, especially if you have a roommate who might not love to hear you reading your personal out loud, but hopefully you have a relationship with them where you can maybe ask them just to listen, be an audience for you, or, do a Zoom call with a close friend to see if they'll just hear you out. And sometimes that's helpful to, have you hear, when maybe there's a run-on sentence or a strange use of comma, or the other person might point that out as well. Write a reverse outline to make sure you've presented your information in a logical way. This is one of my absolute favorite revision techniques. And so after you've written a first draft, what you do is then you go back and write an outline. You go paragraph by paragraph, summarize briefly what your paragraph says, and then move along. And doing that, you can often see where there are logical gaps or errors or missing pieces of information that you wish you had included. And then finally, reach out to your mentors, career services, and SIFSA for support, depending on the nature of the application. Your mentors are experts in your field, in your subject area, and so their insight is invaluable, especially if you're applying for something that's very specific and sort of technical. So, give them plenty of time. 3 or 4 weeks, I think, is usually fair if you have it, but feel free to reach out to your mentors and ask if they would be willing to, take a look at something you've written for a scholarship or fellowship. And oftentimes, with enough time, they're happy to do so. Career services can also be a really great resource, especially if you are applying for things like graduate school or internships. They have a sense of the kinds of things that those applications need as well, and can really be a valuable resource into making sure that you're kind of fitting in with that genre. And then last but not least, SIFSA. Like I've said, we have a lot of experience, and by we, so I'm the assistant director, our director, Jolyn Parker, and another advisor, Adam Crowley. We sort of work as a team of 3, and we help students write and revise their applications for fellowships and scholarships in particular. And so if you are applying to a fellowship or scholarship for outside of the university, so something not funded by SU, we like to think that we're your go-to. And we can really help you kind of craft that narrative of yourself and your experiences to fit the prompt that you're being asked to write. And so I guess I'll, before I talk about the REUs, do we have any questions about the writing process generally? You can either chat it or raise your hand.
Melissa, I have a question, and I totally agree. Please go ahead and put stuff in the chat or unmute, certainly we can do that. I just had a question based on that last slide about, obviously you have a website. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you, Melissa, for some help, how would they go about doing that? And my second question, if you don't mind, is roughly what would you prefer for timing? Like how much time do you need?
That's great.
Just so that they can get an idea. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So I just chatted our general SIFSA email as sifsa@syr.edu. I'm usually the one who responds to it. And then just depending on the what else is going on in our office, I'll distribute that request and reply to one of our staff. And usually I would say for us, 3 to 4 weeks is also fair time. The way that applications work typically is we have sort of a year-long cycle. There's lots of applications due in early fall, which is one of our busiest times. And then again, sort of during the first couple of weeks of the semester in the spring. And, we want to help everyone as much as we can, but just like anyone else, we're limited if we don't have a lot of time. And so for us, a fair amount of time, I would say, is 3 or 4 weeks. But more time is always okay, and even if it's something where you're like, hey, I have this thing I want to apply to in March, and, I want to get started on it, then we can even just have an initial conversation like, okay, great. So, it's, if you wanted to start writing now, you can, but what I would recommend is do your research, reach out to your mentors, look at all the documents you need, and then come back to me by this date with your first draft. And the way most of the individuals in our office work is we exchange drafts from Word docs or Google Docs over email. And then we'll make comments on the document itself through track changes and the comment function. And then we can either have a Zoom conversation about it. For this coming semester, we'll still be doing all appointments virtual. And then we just go from there. So, pretty casual. We try to, be as flexible as possible with how we work. I do think we have a slight preference for using Word docs over Google Docs because we are, over 30. But I'm getting there, I'm working on it.
I hear you.
That's how our office typically operates. And as Alyssa can also share with you, we do other forms of preparation as well. So not only do we help you with your personal statements, we're also happy to help with, diversity statements, other aspects of your application. And then if it's something that requires an interview, we do interview prep for you as well, if that's something that you need for this opportunity and are selected. But yeah, that's generally how we work. And I see a question.
Yes, we just had a question pop in. So
Great.
Thank you for that, Melissa. That's helpful.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. So what if a recommender wants to see your personal statement before it's polished or you're happy with it? So usually it is okay to be like, I'm still revising it, but here's a working draft. Usually or if you have a resume, that can also be helpful too. We do recommend sending a resume, and if you have a draft of that personal statement. If you really don't have one and they still want to see something, you might suggest instead, if they have a minute, just having a conversation with you about what motivates you to apply for this thing and why you think you're a good fit for it. But yeah, they understand that it might take you a while to get a personal statement together, but it is really helpful for them, and they will be the most help to you if they know what specific skills you think you bring to this opportunity and why you're specifically motivated to apply for it, especially as it relates to your future goals. So yeah, just be open with them and see what they need. Difference between a resume and a CV. You're welcome. Honestly, in some ways it's just semantics. I think, CV is typically maybe more academic in its focus, and resume might be a little bit more, industry focused. I think CVs tend to have more emphasis on things like publications, et cetera, than a resume necessarily. But I think if one asks for a CV, a resume format is fine. They're formatted basically the same. Would you agree, Amanda?
Yes, yes. We've done some programming on this before, particularly with our WISE FPP group, and CVs, academia, resumes, typically, industry, shorter 1 to 2 page, a shorter, more concise document. So yeah, absolutely agree. That's what I've heard from some of the other program experts we've had.
Excellent. And that was my sense too. Yeah. And I have had this happen in the last few weeks where I've had a lot of students really trying hard to get everything onto one page, especially by the time you're a senior. 2 pages is okay. Just make sure you're not padding it, fluffing it. By then you don't have to. You usually just probably have a lot of useful experiences. But for most things, 2 pages is the max. But as you go along in your career, don't be afraid to go on to 2 pages for sure. Great questions.
Great.
All right, and if there's no more at this stage, you're welcome. We can move on to specifically REUs. I think some of you were at the presentation. Oh, hold on, there's one more question, we'll get this one. Does it really matter to tell personal things where I come from? Does anyone care? I care. This is relevant to them. No, they do sometimes. So I really think this is where reading the prompt matters. So some types of awards care more about. Hobbies, probably not, unless your hobby is working, diligently every weekend with the Food Bank of Central New York and you have significant outcomes in solving local hunger. Like, do they care that you like ice skate? Maybe. I mean, so some of these are good. They're good questions. And honestly, because of the nature of personal statements, it sometimes just depends. Generally, I think you do want to focus primarily on, your academic experiences and how your personal experiences relate to those and your future goals. So for example, if you have a hobby that really dovetails in with your academic and professional preparation for the opportunity you're applying for, it might be relevant. Yes, you can, and you can definitely specifically say you're a woman of color. I think you will see this if you're applying for REUs specifically, that there really is, especially from the NSF, a genuine concerted effort to diversify the STEM field, and acknowledging and saying explicitly that you are somebody who comes from an underrepresented background is always something that's going to be taken into consideration and adds value to your application. So absolutely, I would say that. And usually the way that applications are structured, they won't even know unless you tell them, but it is something they care about. And again, you'll see some more than others. Like some applications will say we are specifically committed to diversifying, and supporting underrepresented groups, especially women and, women of color, et cetera. Others won't be as explicit about it. And then that kind of just shows that they have a different sort of preference. But yeah, reading the prompt can really help you sort of suss out, will they really care? And what aspects of yourself you want to bring into the story. And let me see. And won't it be annoying as a practice? I think saying that you're a person of color is never annoying. I think maybe even like illegal in some ways to like be annoyed in a like application about that fact of somebody. But again, I think this is also why talking with your mentors and working with SIFs is so helpful, because we can really help you kind of suss out, what are the things that this particular opportunity is looking for. and what are the things about your own background that will be most useful for them to know and that will help you get the thing you want. Okay. And so
We had one more question pop in, and then I know you have to move along.
no, these are all
great questions. I know they're great.
And I'll also say that I hope this is coming across. Like, I'm happy to also have individual meetings with anyone after this. And actually, I really hope that happens, that you're like, oh, wait, I have this thing I'm applying for, and that you'll reach out to SIFSEN. We can set up a meeting. So if there's not a prompt and they're telling you just to write a personal statement, I think what I've overviewed in this presentation before the section we're going into, follow those guidelines. If they just say write a personal statement, if it's for something like a fellowship, scholarship, STEM summer program, you want to be very clear, what is your background? Is this pertinent to doing the thing they're asking you to do? What if it's for, summer research in a lab focused on, like stem cell research, what lab experience do you have? What experience studying in class do you have on, cell biology? What are your future goals, and how would spending a summer in a stem cell lab be beneficial to you? If you have difficulty accessing lab resources because of the university you're at, or there's no other faculty doing that here at SU, emphasize that, really make them see that it is super important for you to get this experience elsewhere because it can't be done here. And so just, make that pitch. Even if there's no prompt, you'll still get a good sense of what the institution is looking for by their eligibility requirement and by their own description of the research that's being conducted or the experience that's being offered. Yeah, excellent question. And a lot of them do just say write a personal statement. So it is good to kind of think about, what does that mean? All right, I'm going to move on to the specific of a description of REUs, I think, at this point. But great questions, everyone, definitely. And this is like I said, I know that these are tough things to write, so I'm happy to talk at great length about it. So NSF REUs are funded summer research opportunities at university labs across the US. You identify and apply directly to the sites that fit your research interests and career goals. And so there's a website that the NSF hosts where you can look through hundreds of them that are on offer. But then once you find one that interests you, there's usually an external link, and you click and follow the individual REU site's application process. Most REUs are open only to US citizens and permanent residents. There are a few that are open to international students. And so you should also take a look at that. If you are an international student, you might just have to spend a little bit more time digging, unfortunately. You do need to be, regardless, currently enrolled at a US institution of higher ed. And there are some additional eligibility requirements outlined by specific REUs. So again, do they want someone from an underrepresented background? Do they want someone who is, has completed at least a sophomore year? Do they want someone specifically who majors in bioengineering? Do they want someone specifically who has had 0 lab experience? That also happens. And that's really important, I think, for students to keep in mind, especially early on, that sometimes direct experience working in a research lab outside of coursework is actually not preferable. They want to be a place that helps students early on who haven't had the chance. And if so, again, you'll want to write about that. And so for the breakout room activity that I want us to do today, I think hopefully this will help you understand how you begin that process of thinking about what to do when you're confronted with a program or experience that you want to apply for. And how do you begin thinking like the reviewer, thinking like the person who is promoting this and who will be looking for a candidate they want to select. So Amanda has just chatted an upload of this slide. So if you want to click on the link now and make sure you have it at the ready, we're going to get into breakout rooms, and I'm going to have you kind of do this activity. So the first link I have here on the slide, and if I click it, can you now see the screen pop up, Amanda, or is it still the
Yes, nope, I can see it.
Okay, great. So that takes you directly to, and I just wanted you to have this link, the place where you go at NSF to search for REU programs. And you see here, there's a little tab that says search for REU site. And then it's listed sort of by specialization or field, and then you click on that, and then you can search in that way. for the, I've kind of selected one that I want you to use as an example for today. It's one offered by Florida Institute of Technology. Oops, sorry. Here we go. And it's statistical models with applications to geosciences called SMAG. Some of them have really fun little acronyms, which I personally enjoy. RU program at Florida International or Florida FIT, Institute of Technology. And so I want you to take a look at this specific site and its description. And so here you'll see, and many of the web pages are formatted in this way, that there'll be a brief introduction of what the program will be looking at, what research is being done, the specific things that students can expect to learn and experiences they'll have while participating. And here very clearly objectives of the statistical models with applications to geosciences RU program. So what do they hope that students will achieve? When are the dates of its program, general information about what's offered, student eligibility, and then sponsors, so NSF. And so I want you to take a look at that site and answer 3 questions with your group. So question 1, what are the qualities they're looking for in a candidate, including basic eligibility and preferences? And so looking at that eligibility section, but also taking a look at the, the overview as a whole and seeing if there's specific things that you can tell they're interested in. Question 2, what skills should an applicant try and demonstrate in their application? So looking to see what is being done there and what are some ways that a student might be able to demonstrate their skills. And again, I think, I want this to be a more hypothetical activity than thinking specifically of what you would bring. So, who are they looking for? Which brings me to the last thing. What do you think they describe as their ideal candidate for this RU? What would be the qualities that someone would bring to an application for this that you think would make them really stand out amongst the pack? And that's the activity. So should I stop sharing at this point while we go into breakout rooms? Maybe?
I don't know that it matters.
Okay.
I have the breakout room set up. I just wondered, Melissa, what you were thinking for time. What would work best for you?
We're at 42 minutes and we're trying to keep it into an hour, right?
Right.
So let's see how much you can get through in 5. So it'll be truncated. It'll be speed read, but that's at least, so we can talk about it for 5 minutes after that. And then I want to make sure we have plenty of time for a list of experiences as well. So, or at least 10 minutes if that's possible.
Yeah, why don't we'll meet in the middle. How about we do 7?
Okay.
We'll do 7. Good. All right, here we go.
All right, so, and let me see if I can expand my view of faces. Here we go. So with who wants to offer a possible answer for the first question? And if you just want to take yourself off mute and start talking or raise a hand, what are the qualities that you think this RU is looking for in a candidate, including basic eligibility and preferences? Or maybe how about we do it this way? Why don't we chat it? How about what are some, in just quick words, what are some of the things that SMAG is looking for in their candidates? Women and minority students, yes, definitely. Yep, if this is absolutely an opportunity where if you are someone who is a woman, a minority, from an underrepresented community in STEM, you want to make that clear in your personal statement and how that is related to your experience in STEM. Yes, finishing sophomore year. This one does have a preference for who they want. It's a preference, not an absolute requirement. And so if you are someone who has a lot of research experience and coursework as a first-year student, you might still want to apply. But it's probably suggesting they're looking for someone that has a little bit more experience than necessarily a first-year student. 8-week availability, absolutely. So you do need to look and see on the timeline, will that fit in with my own summer plans? And am I available to make that time commitment? Yep, US citizens or green card holders. And so they're very specific about that. So you have to think about, am I someone who meets that basic eligibility? And then this one, those with limited research experience. And so And it is that interesting sort of tension. So limited research experience, but also finishing their sophomore year. And so something that you'll want to sort of negotiate as you describe yourself in this statement. So maybe you don't necessarily have limited research experience, but you have limited experience in this particular research. And that can be a distinction that you can make that makes an eligibility change as well. Great. I'm trying to look at my own notes. What else did I, what was the career goal that seems to be something that they're kind of looking for or that they want to help someone prepare for? Did anyone notice that? Yes, pursue advanced degrees. Yes, yes. Scientific career, statistics. I'm excited because I think these are really important. I think really pursuing advanced degrees, the specific award says they're really interested in helping students explore those career opportunities. So if you are someone who wants to go to graduate school, you would absolutely want to specify that in this application and what for, and connect how an opportunity like this could help prepare you for that future outcome. Statistics and data analysis. So especially if you are in a field or want a career where you are, passionate about statistics and data analysis, you want to make that clear. And it is true, especially for REUs, that oftentimes students, they really just want students who want lab experience generally, but the stronger students and, all things being equal, you probably have a lot of choices to make. You'll want to choose ones where, what you're going to learn specifically really relate to those future goals. Like if you want to get a, PhD in statistics, this is probably a good REU for you. Although I'll save those comments like that for the last question, have you sort of answer. But yes, those I think are kind of the main points. Sophomore, underrepresented background, U.S. citizen or green card, at least 18, something else it said, limited research experience, statistics and data analysis, and interest in grad school. Great job, everyone. And so for the second question, what skills should an applicant try and demonstrate in their application? And so let's do it the same way. Just chat some skills that you think a student would want to, demonstrate that they have to be competitive. Yes, experience with surveying the earth and data collection, leadership skills, coding, all good, yes. And again, you would want to think if you were applying to this, how could you tell stories that show that you have coding skills, have leadership skills, have done, have experience with surveying the earth and data collection. And I do think it's really important, again, for something like this. It is geosciences, but I do think that there will probably be students applying for this who have more experience or less experience with geoscience specifically. And the flip side, more or less experience doing statistics and data coding in geosciences. And so one could either go to build more skills in geosciences, more skills in coding as they apply to each other and vice versa. Anything else? What skills should an applicant try and demonstrate? Leadership, coding. You could also talk about an interest in professional development. I think this program offers a lot of really great opportunities for professional development. So you might want to talk about, that you have experience giving presentations on research, or that you have experience, serving as a mentor to others, which sort of relates to leadership, and how you're really excited to continue growing those skills and developing them in this program as well. So I think that really fits. All right, so question 3, what do you think they describe as their ideal candidate for this REU? So imagine it as sort of I guess we're coming up on Valentine's Day, like, I'm seeking X, what's the candidate they're seeking? What are some of the key qualities you think they're really looking for in an applicant? Hoping you're typing long blurbs. Okay. All right, well, I'll go with mine, or at least with what I imagine a lot of you are thinking. So the ideal candidate, oh yeah, ooh, good, yes. Student interested in pursuing an advanced degree in data science, interested in doing research related to geoscience, topics like climate change. Absolutely. Someone who's interested in climate change, diverse person that can bring a new and interesting experience to the group. Definitely. Yeah, so somebody who is a woman or underrepresented individual in STEM, who has a desire to go to graduate school, who can articulate why having more experience learning about geoscience and statistical models, how they'll benefit those career goals. Somebody who is a sophomore, but maybe hasn't had as much research experience as they would like, or somebody who is a sophomore and has had research experience, but still needs more experience in this particular area. Definitely, that's the kind of person they're looking for. And so what I would say then, and what I hope you get from this exercise, is that that's the kind of work you want to do when you start out, really analyzing what that program description is looking for, maybe thinking about, what would you describe as the ideal candidate, and then thinking about how you can tell your story as if you were that person, and obviously you're not maybe going to check every box in the ideal candidate breakout, but you will probably check a lot of them. And if you do check most of them, I think it's probably a good opportunity for you to pursue. And then you can think about creative ways that you can include and connect your experiences to what you think they're looking for. It might not always be a slam dunk, but sometimes there's a lot of, ways that you can kind of position yourself as somebody that would be desirable for this program. And again, I think that's one of the reasons that SIFSA is so helpful, is that we can really, spend time talking with you about your background, personal and professional, your academic research experiences, et cetera, and help you think about how that aligns with what the opportunity you're looking at is interested in and how to then articulate that in writing. So yeah, so great job, everyone. And hopefully, if nothing else, you've learned that we exist and are ready to help you. And then without further ado, I know we're kind of running out of time, but I hope you can all stick around for a few more minutes to hear from Melissa and what her experience has been like as a woman of color in STEM applying for fellowships and scholarships. And let me get my Alyssa PowerPoint. Yay! Sure.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm a chemistry, environment, sustainability, and policy major. I've actually applied or I've done 2 REUs. I did one, the summer after my freshman year. It was in Austria. I was working in the Department of Physical and Theoretical Chemistry. And then the second one that I did was after my sophomore year at Syracuse University, or research institute in the Department of Molecular Medicine. I now have been transitioning over to more policy work. I'm working at a research lab in Syracuse under Dr. WWoCS, researching clean energy plans and mapping out clean energy plans around the US. So yeah, that's been really cool. I guess just talking about my experience, I think from the start of my freshman year, I was definitely reaching out to professors. I know, at least on the chemistry website, they have the list of professors that are doing research. So I literally just sent out an email to each professor that I was interested in their work and hey, are you looking for anybody to work in your lab? And I mean, if not, to do it over this over the school year. I know last year for COVID, I was already doing research and all of my internships fell through, and my the person that I was doing research with extended me to do research throughout the summer, which was really nice. So just looking for any opportunities on campus is really awesome. And then throughout these opportunities that I've had, I've made a lot of mentors and different people. So my opportunity in Austria, the person that I was doing research under had actually talked to me about it. And then I'm now working pretty closely with SIFSA and Jolyn and Melissa. And that was through the person that I'm doing research under now, who had told me about some scholarship that he thought I should apply for. And then I went and talked to Jolyn about it really quickly. And now I'm doing other things with them, and then she was like, oh well, you know what, I don't think you're good for this, but maybe you should apply for this stuff. So just reaching out, and even if you think oh no, they're not going to want to talk to me, or this is stupid, I don't want to do it anymore, just making that first interaction, now you have that connection. Like it really is so many opportunities and people that want to help you on campus, and like that you think like, oh no, but they will. Like even professors, like I had a professor write me a letter of recommendation for Fulbright that I just applied for, and I knew him for like maybe a semester, and he helped me apply, but he was like so excited to write me a letter of recommendation. He was like, oh my God, please let me know if you ever need me to write one again. And I was like, oh, of course, like I will. And surprisingly, I actually got to read it because for this one other one he had to like send it to me, and it was like surprisingly pretty in depth. And I was like, oh, that's nice. So yeah, just like reaching out to any connections you've made. I think specifically like being a woman of color, like you don't, I know somebody in the chat said like, do we have to talk about it? Like you don't have, if you don't want to say, you don't have to say it. Like you don't have to talk about, I know sometimes for me it's like, I guess sometimes you have this sort of like what is that called, when you feel like you're somewhere but you don't know why? It's the imposter syndrome. And it's kind of like, this is not what I want to get me into this program, so that's not what I'm gonna say. And like that's okay too, because I know, at least for me, sometimes I've had that feeling. So like again, if you don't want to mention it, and you can use any of your background experiences that you think connect to whatever program you're applying to make that your application stand out. It doesn't necessarily, if they say they're looking for a person of color, you don't have to, you don't even have to say that you're a person of color. If you think you stand out because of some other reason, I know sometimes it can be annoying and like hard to kind of maneuver. But yeah, so that was my personal experience. I know specifically like when applying to Syracuse University, I didn't mention anything about like my background or race or anything. Posse, like the scholarship that I'm part of, really focuses on diversity. And I like wrote my essay about my brother and how he was like really great like leader, and like how he made me want to be like better or whatever. So yeah, that's just, I guess, advice for specifically women of color and what was said in the chat earlier. And then also I know Melissa touched on like how applying you have to talk about, you know, your future goals. And I think that that's like just applying and writing about these future goals, it starts to get you to think like, okay, what do I actually want to do? And then also the work that I've done, like the heavy research that I've done like in theoretical chemistry and molecular biology, like allowed me to figure out like, oh, this is not what I want to do. And now I'm kind of like on what I think right now for me is like a good track. It may change, we'll see. But yeah, it helped me kind of figure out what track I specifically want to be on. And like, even if the opportunity that I wanted wasn't exactly like the research that I wanted to do, or I wasn't really like, oh, I'm like crazy about this, but it was like an opportunity and it helped me like get in a lab. I personally took it because it was like, okay, this is what I have, I'm gonna go for it. And that helped me just realize like, oh, I don't like the lab setting, and now I kind of want to go more into like science within community. So yeah. And then also I think something I would say is like, if you don't think that the description of the applicant is you, but you still think that you're a really good like candidate, like let's say, you know, you're not from a community college or you have research experience, like for this past example, like just apply anyways, because you really don't ever know. And if you think something is a really good fit, then just go for it. But yeah, I think that's kind of all I have to say. If anybody has any questions, I don't know. That's it.
Thank you, Alyssa. That's great. Yay! Round of applause. And I'm
Melissa.
Oh.
No, I was just saying thank you too. Appreciate it.
And I really think, you know, you just said so many great things, and I'm so glad we got to have you today. And I am really glad that you brought up that point of like, obviously you don't need to disclose more than you're comfortable with. And I'm really glad that you clarified that, because that's true. I mean, I think if an opportunity is looking for, you know, is interested in diversifying, you know, STEM, it is one of those pieces they're looking for, and it helps you, but you ultimately make that call. And I think that it's really, you know, great to be honest with yourself about what's important to you, and what, you know, you get to tell your story, and what is included and what isn't is up to you, and you own that. And so thank you so much for making that point. And I think, you know, really clarifying too, that this is an exercise, applying for scholarships and fellowships. Well, obviously you want to, you know, receive them, it's valuable in helping you clarify your future goals. And we hear that over and over again from students we work with. Just like Alyssa said, it forces you to really think concretely about the types of careers available. How do you get them? You might end up looking around to see on the internet, like who has jobs that you would like in which organizations. And sometimes you can even reach out to them and have informational interviews. It really does, I think, help in a lot of ways, you know, you think about the career you want. And then, yeah, I think, again, that last point, like, sometimes you might not look like the right candidate on paper, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't apply. And I really think that's one of the things we like to do in SIFSA is not necessarily, you know, we do try to help you understand or assess, you know, where you can better use your time. You know, time is limited and you probably don't want to apply to literally everything, but all things being equal, you know, we can hopefully help you figure out how to bring what you do have to the table in a way that still makes you a compelling candidate, even if you don't necessarily think that you fit the mark. And the last thing I love that you said, Alyssa, was don't shortchange yourself and think that people don't want to help you or won't want to listen to you, or that you haven't built a long enough relationship to be. Just ask, just ask. There's no harm in sending that email and seeing what they say. And I really do think that this campus is filled with, you know, so many people who are just dying to help a student achieve their goals. That's why most of us wanted to become professors or staff in higher ed. That's what we live for, you know, besides the, you know, sciencey research stuff. And it's true. And you'll be surprised, I think, just like Alyssa said, about the people who are really ready to go to bat for you and spend time helping you achieve your goals. So, yeah. So I guess final questions, either for Alyssa specifically or for Amanda or myself. Oh, and I'll stop share. We can just see each other now. All right, then maybe without further ado, I guess I'm happy. I have a couple minutes. I can stick around for a minute or two if anyone wants to ask something without the big group, or just, you know, my personal email, I'm chatting it right now, is mlwelsha@syr.edu. If you just want to reach out to me directly, or again, the general inquiry inbox for the Center for Fellowship and Scholarship Advising is sifsa@syr.edu. And 3 or 4 weeks is a good lead time for something, but we also, you know, it never hurts to just email and be like, I have a thing due next week. Do you have time? If we do, we'll usually say yes. If we don't, we might say no. We're not going to be mad either way. So just reach out where you're at and we'll try to meet you there.
Great. Well, I can't thank you both enough, Melissa and Alyssa. This was wonderful. Lots of thank yous in the chat. Absolutely. Lots of information to take in, really helpful tips. So appreciative of that. And also lots of encouragement and inspiration, Alyssa. Absolute encouragement from both of you, and very inspiring, Alyssa, everything that you've done and sounds like you're about to do. So really appreciate that. A great event for our community today. So I really appreciate that. I did pop the evaluation link into the chat a little bit earlier. So appreciate your feedback. We keep them as short as we can. Take a couple minutes to complete that. And hopefully we'll see you all on February 9th for our networking event. So yeah. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day.